Hello, all. Oh, we can't start on Monday with that. You'll have the morning to get all warmed up and find this room. It's like a mouse to go crazy on that. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. Well, good. Okay, we've got a lot of good news we're going to go ahead and chat about today, and it is inspiring to have all of you. Thank you for taking the time to come and join, and welcome to reInvent. Actually, even with these lights, I can see some familiar faces that are out there. For those that I haven't had the privilege of meeting yet, my name is Jeff Kratz, and I get the honor to look after our global public sector industries organization. And around the world, today we get to talk about a lot of goodness that's happening, leveraging technology in a world that does need a lot of healing in so many different ways. And we're going to see how governments, as well as international organizations, are harnessing the cloud to drive that good. And we're going to explore real-life scenarios, real-life stories that we're going to share in the spirit of reInvent, which when we got started with reInvent many years ago, as part of the original team that had the first one 12 years ago, it was to share best practices, it was to share learnings, how overcoming of different challenges that are out there, and to have this be a learning conference. And it's in that spirit that we're going to continue to share how governments are trailblazing in so many different ways to help drive on behalf of citizens, organizations, nonprofit organizations, aerospace and satellite and more, for a greater good. And for those that are already doing business with AWS, thank you. For those that are new to AWS, thank you for making the investment to travel from wherever around the world you may have come through multiple hops. I was talking with a colleague this morning who jumped through 4 countries to get here as a part of this week. We're going to make sure that they have a really good week as a part of it. But thank you for your investment of time, because we've got so many opportunities now to drive good. And there's no challenge that is really too big for us jointly to go ahead and tackle and solve together. And what we're hearing from all of you around the globe is a need to have faster innovation, to have more engagements and that best practices, because we're seeing public sector customers jump in, to lean in and helping harness a broad breadth of services in so many different ways with the experience that we've brought and a partner community to help solve these challenges, to lean in and in partnership. Just recently, a couple of weeks ago, I had the pleasure of hosting the president of Costa Rica up in Seattle. He came by for a lot of different meetings, and they have since announced a wonderful private-public partnership specifically on generative AI. How do you have privacy and security, yet with agility? And together they had a wonderful engagement over the last number of months, together with AWS and other partners, to help find and strike that balance on behalf of their 6 million citizens and driving that innovation, driving that job and economic growth. And they're just one of many countries around that we are seeing this trend continue. And from our side, we're continuing to lean in. As governments lean in with AWS, we're leaning in and we're continuing to invest around the globe. These are just a couple of the different countries that you can see, and the amount of investment, literally billions of dollars of infrastructure to make sure that the technology and services are there. The AWS Cloud having 34 different regions, 6 additional ones that we've announced in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Thailand, Taiwan. We're really excited for our EU customers of launching next year the European Sovereign Cloud. And a total that was done by Accenture, one of our real trusted, awesome partners, was that this AWS generation would be $161 billion in added value to 12 national economies, driving that GNP growth, driving those local jobs, driving that investment. And we really invite you to help seize on this momentum that is there. And that interest has been on a variety of different topics, from generative AI to resiliency, security, new citizen services. How does the government leverage technology to bridge the digital divide with so much other populace. And from my trips literally around the globe, I was just looking at my calendar for this past year. I was on the road an average of 3 out of 4 weeks a month, going from Malaysia to Germany to you name it, listening to our customers and partners that are out there. And constantly they're asking about generative AI. What does government need to do now? What are those different parts? Is it really going to stay, or is this another phenomenon that's going to fade? And more, virtually every industry is going through this digital transformation. And while there is a wide range of engagements that is happening, we are seeing consistency around the globe. One is that you really can't harness the power of generative AI to do good, to do modernization, to help address citizen needs, security needs, or others, education, without leveraging cloud computing. It just becomes economically challenging when you're looking at petabytes of information, maybe in healthcare, like Costa Rica or others, of looking at how do you help provide those new services without. And so the first rule that we're hearing more and more in an area that is moving very rapidly, just look at AWS. The past 12 months, 300 new generative AI services we've released to the fleet out to help be used in a myriad of different ways, is that the foundation of AI has to be on the cloud. From that perspective, we're seeing governments jump in. Say, for instance, looking at Singapore and a wonderful opportunity that they have. The government of Singapore has launched AI Singapore, and if you've got your phone, it's a wonderful QR code to clear up. AI Singapore developed a culturally accurate, localized, and tailored large language model that now is being shared throughout the entire country. And from that, it's essential in scaling a much more cost-effective way of doing citizen services out. What was really fascinating about is the speed by which they were able to leverage their efforts to help provide small businesses to the government central services as a part. And you can read through just some of the wonderful comments that were made. The second big rule is that really your data strategy at the end of the day will determine your return on investment from leveraging generative AI. We have a lot of customers that want to race and start using generative AI right now. But if you have garbage in, you're going to get garbage out at the end of the day. And many are saying, well, how do I move these petabytes of this information over into the cloud? What's that process? How do I get there? Some, as a government recently talked with me, has literally magnetic tapes that they have stored in a big vault. Yes, we can go ahead and move those on in. But while it's tempting to think that generative AI can solve all these different areas, it's really the data process and the usage. Another customer down in Latin America was walking through all of the government's main systems, the end of life. And they literally, like public sector and government, have a little bit of everything. Microsoft SQL Server to COBOL, to mainframes, to you name it, they literally have everything. But they're looking at end of life of those systems. And some of them didn't make sense to move to the cloud, but the data did. How do they preserve that data? And they're forming data lakes to help provide new insights into their military, for instance. When do they do recruiting? When are soldiers leaving? What are the services that are out? And organizations that are successful with generative AI leverage as a part of that real business value with clean data. And we're helping work through that process. There's a number of great sessions here at reInvent that I would encourage going at all different technical and business levels to how to get started as a part, because that data strategy will determine your success ultimately downstream. Now, what we're finding is leveraging that data, clean data, and the modernization of that along the way, that regulated industries right now are moving in some of the fastest ways. Now, that may seem a little weird. Can government act like a startup? And the answer is yes. And we're seeing it in different types of industries around. Take, for instance, New York Stock Exchange, insurance companies, healthcare. Why? Because they've got the guardrails and the different services now for clean data that they have been monitoring along the way. And these customers have been driving the right behavior for quite some time. As a result, we're seeing regulated industries move really quickly to leveraging the new technology and bringing those insights that are out there for efficiency gains. That includes, for instance, if I jump around the world, to give you some of the examples that we're seeing today that are using. Up in Norway, Ruter is the state-owned agency for public transportation. And it's part of the critical infrastructure for the entire country. And from that, they serve over 1 million travelers that are moving on through, with over 1 million departures literally every single day that's occurring. They've been able to leverage the large language models on AWS first of all, they had to anonymize all of the data. That meant to the regulations that they would have. But now they've been on to drive an internal Gen AI assistant that's being able to, first of all, speak the Norwegian language, to answer the questions on their own internal data. And as a result now, they've saved over 300 hours of manual case management for over 10,000 cases and counting, being much more efficient. Government being efficient with travelers and with the travelers' money and the citizens' money at the end of the day. They were using Amazon Bedrock to help harness this as well as other services, while wrapped with security. Security is paramount. And when we started AWS Public Sector, we knew that. And from day zero, we've continued to build in security across everything that we do, because we knew that that would be critical for helping Reuters, as well as those down in Brazil that are leveraging AWS. Jumping to Brazil, a country I know well from lots of time that's on a digital transformation move. It's exciting to see Brazil continue to lead in so many areas, not only in Latin America, but in other areas around the globe. The Federal Prosecution Service, it's also known as MPF. They are the body that helps both at the federal and local level, managing roughly 10,000 employees across 12 different states. And the prosecutor mandate required them to help automate many of those processes for the follow-up of different cases that are out there. And critical was security and efficiency, finding that balance. And they found it. That's why they chose Amazon Bedrock in conjunction with the partner. And now their proof of concepts and others are out in 7 offices that is expected to save over 40,000 hours per year, increasing just on efficiency of processing through different prosecutors' cases that are helping the court cases be more responsive to plaintiffs as well as to government themselves in a variety of different ways. This is a really exciting opportunity, because whether it's in Brazil or here stateside of Asia Pacific, we are seeing one of the fast growing areas for generative AI for efficiency be in court cases, helping the processing of all of those court cases that are out there. Another one that was really exciting to see, jumping and continuing, was up in Sweden with the Sweden National Courts Administration. They wanted to jump into cloud really quickly. They provide the services and infrastructure for a little over 80 courts across the country. And this was specifically, they were looking at training policies that were there. The notary clerks, how do you renew those? How do judges become judges? What's that process? And some of those processes literally took 8 years for someone to walk through. And it wasn't just because people wanted to learn and test and you wanted to maintain quality, but it was also the process for how people walked on through their entire journey. The customer got engaged with our partner community, as the vast majority of our public sector customers do. And as a result, they've been able to reduce the amount of time for that platform and that collaboration, linking together different systems to better help the agents not only walk through the process for being certified, but the efficiency that was there. And now they're continuing to scale it, not only within their own country, but other Scandinavian countries are starting to look and say, wow, this is a best practice. How can the courts continue to be efficient while making sure that the training and certification of those personnel in the courts meets the expectation and the qualities that are needed? These productivity enhancements we're seeing around the globe. As governments continue to act like startups and leverage the technology, whether it is in court cases, as I've just mentioned with Scandinavia or Brazil, or other areas that are looking around the globe, trains and others. It's fascinating to get the results. And we're just at the beginning of this journey that's here. And these tools really help make public servants that much more efficient. It's much more responsive to the citizens of that. However, unlocking that really has to focus and address one of the key parts, and that's security controls at the end of the day. As I mentioned earlier, from the beginning, from day zero, we are focused on having a rich and robust and constantly refreshed security platform that enables that agility and innovation wrapped all with security. And our government customers are telling us now that they've crossed across a transom of mental thought, and that's they're going to the cloud for the security. To keep the on-premise systems up becomes taxing. They have to do manual updates across all. It becomes incredibly costly for on-premise. And one of the core reasons they're moving to the cloud is because of security, because we meet the data security, the classification, the sovereignty topics. In fact, for anyone here that is from Europe or in the EU countries, there's a phenomenal session tomorrow morning, and then I think it's Wednesday afternoon, a second, specifically on the European sovereign cloud and how we are addressing proactively a number of the requirements. A strong recommendation to join that session, because we're going to continue to invest. This is one that we do not let a day go by, a moment go by, where we're not helping governments maintain that agility and that security. And that goes down into our technology in a lot of different ways. For instance, one part that we have is our AWS Nitro system. It's the unparalleled computing backbone of AWS. And it was designed both with hardware and the firmware, et cetera, so that nobody, including AWS, can access the data, nor the applications that are running on top of that. We don't use that data. That's your data. It's not our data. That's a part. But it was designed specifically with security, reliability, and maintaining our customers having complete control over their data. And all of our AWS regions are powered by the AWS Nitro system. And that's to continue to have the confidentiality and the integrity of the system for our customers. We also got some new AI services that are coming out. I mentioned guardrails on AI. Well, we have Amazon Bedrock guardrails. And this is another great QR code. And this is a response to our customers. They were saying, in this area of modernization, in this area of trying to drive so quickly to respond to the citizens and business needs in countries, we need to have a consistent safeguards that are tailored to an organization's application requirement, not just to the infrastructure, application requirements. Give us the tools. So for instance, this helps filter hallucinations that are out there. It helps that outputs that are more plausible versus those that seem off the rails, if you pardon the pun on that one. And it's additional tools, and Amazon Bedrock Guardrails is just one of a myriad of different services now that are available to help provide those safeguards for government, education, aerospace, and other public sector institutions that are out there. Now, we've seen this effort of jumping into generative AI continue around the world in so many different areas, and it's to also enable being able to scale securely. So if I jump on over to the Middle East as just one, and that is the UAE's Technology Innovation Institute, or also TII. And they were one of the first to jump in and help develop the Falcon large language model that now is powering, it's a national LLM, leverages Amazon Bedrock. And that is moving very rapidly so that individuals, startups, and others in research can accelerate their development. And what's fascinating is to see the UAE government share that with other emerging countries around the globe that may not have the technology or the resources available through a variety of different trade agreements back and forth. And from that perspective, it's a very sophisticated infrastructure with hundreds of GPUs, and they are simplifying that for other customers, not just those that are in UAE, but around the globe. Another that's jumping and looking at how governments to governments can work more efficiently together and leverage each other's strengths. Now, most of the large language models, if you're not familiar, they've got vast data sets that are out, most of them in English, but not all of them. And we're starting to see now from South Korea with Upstage and others, other language models that are coming. And one that was really exciting was to see the government of Greece jump on in. How do you preserve and protect and have accurate the Greek language that's out there? And the government has led in on that and offers now a foundational model that they are leveraging on a global construct so that any organization can tap on. It's deployed on Amazon Bedrock, and the customer, not going to answer that. Forgot to turn it off, as you all saw. What was really exciting about this is that government said, we've got to preserve the integrity and the long life of the Greek language. It's a fundamental part of history. It got us here. It's going to help get us there. How do we leverage that? And they're using Amazon Bedrock and other generative AI services from AWS to help, and that's being extended into tourism, cultural centers, business applications around the globe, law and legal professions. And they're now working on a generative AI innovation center, which they hope to announce soon, with additional large language models. Again, new ways to take this technology and extend the relevance out around the globe. One other part that we're really excited about has been our partnership with the United Nations. Now, this is a personal one for me because I grew up just north of where the United Nations was, up in Connecticut. And as a child, I would get to have the opportunity to go down and see the General Assembly and the beautiful buildings and hear all the great activities that United Nations was driving. And it is one of the amazing organizations that's driving tech for good in so many different areas. Now, as you know, the United Nations is called upon around the globe in so many different scenarios, and in particular in conflicts and disasters that are out there. They get engaged when there's literally millions of displaced citizens and people. And one of the hard times in those scenarios is accessing that information and finding that information out for relief organizations and nonprofits to all help come together and help solve whatever the crisis may be. The UN Office for Coordination on Humanitarian Affairs runs a service called ReliefWeb. And it's a website that provides real-time information of intelligence in emergency zones around the world. Right now, ReliefWeb has over 18 million users. And what this helps is it enables teams to help in hospitals or refugee camps in a variety of different areas. Now, to provide that, you need to provide that information literally in seconds, because lives count, lives matter that are out there. And making sure that the right relief organizations are helping in the right areas becomes paramount. And it has to be accurate. It has to be timely. It has to be secure. And so the UN worked with AWS to develop Ask ReliefWeb. It's a generative AI chatbot that leverages Amazon's Titan infrastructure to help provide foundational models through Bedrock out. And so by leveraging this, now humanitarian workers can now access literally critical information within seconds, not days, not months, not weeks, not longer, as a part, based on the different requirements that are out there. as you see, this is just one of a myriad of ways that the partnership between AWS and the United Nations has been to help drive good, to help drive a better tomorrow that's out there. And we've been really excited to work together with the United Nations in so many different areas. If you're not familiar, the UN has a sustainable development goals, 17 actionable goals, working across the globe to help drive sustainability, equitable and prosperous future for all of us around the globe. With that, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Frederick Warner, Head of AI for Good at the United Nations International Telecommunication Union, and Abby Daniels from AWS to come share a little bit about how the UN organization is leveraging technology to drive a greater good. Please join me in welcoming them to the stage.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you so much. So welcome to everyone. I'm Abby Daniel, and I have the privilege of leading the international organizations team at AWS. And we support organizations like the United Nations to be able to deliver in their mission using AWS Cloud. And as Jeff said, we're very fortunate today to have Fred Warner with us. Fred is Head of Strategic Engagement at the International Telecommunications Union, and also is the originator of the AI for Good initiative and the Chief of Strategy and Operations. He also was the creator of the AI for Good Summit, the Global AI for Good Summit, that he'll tell you a little bit more about as we talk today. And prior to that, was in Brussels leading the Global IT Telecommunications Association and was responsible for bringing together CIOs and cybersecurity professionals across Europe to be able to deliver results for the region. Fred, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Great to be here, and thanks for the kind introduction. Thank you.
So start off by sharing with the group here a little bit about the UN ITU and the AI initiatives that you're working on.
Yeah, sure. So the ITU is the United Nations Digital Agency for Technology, and basically we do three things. One is we allocate and harmonize radio spectrum for telecommunications. We also develop international standards that underpin modern telecommunication networks, and we assist developing countries in bringing up their ICT infrastructure. And actually, we do four things. We're also the creator and organizer of AI for Good. And what's unique about ITU is we're the only UN agency among about 50 or so agencies that has a public-private membership model. So we have 194 member states as members, and we have 1,000 private companies, including about 150 academic institutions. And basically, we created AI for Good in 2017. And if you think about that, that's an eternity in terms of AI years. In 2017, you had AlphaGo, you had Elon Musk and Stephen Hawking saying we've summoned the devils. You know, how things have changed. But basically, AI for Good was created on the premise that we now have only 5 years left to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And AI holds great promise to advance many of those goals and targets. So from climate change to affordable healthcare to education for all, to basically natural disaster management, gender equity or inequities, and going into more, let's say, high-tech solutions in the physical world like autonomous driving, robotics, brain-computer interfaces. I think it's safe to say that the use cases are definitely there. But how do you know that a high-potential AI health application, for example, works equally well on men or women, or on persons of different skin colors, or on children or the elderly, persons with disabilities, or in low-resource settings where basic things that we take for granted like electricity, Wi-Fi, 5G are actually real problems. So these are not natural reflexes for the fast-moving tech and startup industry. I think the track record shows it has been more like build it and we'll fix it later. But these are things that we and our partners like AWS think deeply about of the AI for Good community. So what is AI for Good? Well, simply put, the goal of AI for Good is to build trustworthy applications of AI to advance the SDGs and figure out how to create skills, capacity, and standards to advance these applications in the support of global AI governance. And how do we do this? Well, first of all, we can't do this alone. That's why we're all here in this room. And we have 47 UN sister agencies as partners of AI for Good. So that's virtually the entire UN system that's been contributing to AI for Good, sharing knowledge, benefiting from our network, and participating in our summits and our projects and our standards building since 2017. And now the AI experts themselves, many of you who I believe are in this room, would probably agree that AI is too important to leave to the experts themselves. So great efforts have been made to bring as many different voices to the table. So you have industry, of course, we have academia, UN agencies, member states, NGOs, civil society, international media, and also making sure that we include youth, gender, the creatives, athletes, and really bringing as many different voices to the table who all have a stake in the future of humankind using AI. And basically what I'd like to say is AI for Good is there to be leveraged. It's an open platform. We have a summit in Geneva that takes place every year. Next year it will be the 8th to the 11th in Geneva. But we also have an online platform with 37,000 members called the Neural Network, where we have online webinars, keynotes, demos, panels, where you can all connect with each other to learn and build and collaborate. Thank you.
Thanks, Fred. You know, as Jeff mentioned and you spoke about, there are the 17 SDGs, really cutting across all areas, natural disasters, poverty, et cetera. And the platform is an amazing tool. Share with the group a little bit about some of the specific things that you're doing and specific use cases to accelerate the development of those goals using AI.
Sure. Yeah, so now time for some good news, bad news. I'll start with bad news. The SDGs, about 18% of them are on track for completion for 2030. So that's not great. But the good news is about 80% of the SDG goals and targets could be positively impacted by AI. And we see many really encouraging examples of this. And I would have to say at this year's summit in Geneva, I really saw a shift from amazing use cases in PowerPoint. You know the old joke, AI is in PowerPoint and machine learning is in Python. So we've seen a lot of PowerPoint and a lot of hype. But this was the first summit I saw where really these ideas were being transferred into real life scenarios and really affecting people's lives in a positive way. I'll give you an example. So at the last summit, we had a patient, a young man in Portugal who had ALS, locked-in syndrome. So he was in a hospital bed, can't move, not even a finger, can't speak, totally locked in. And using a combination of brain-computer interface sensors on his skull with generative AI over a 5G network, was able to communicate with our audience in Geneva and actually have a conversation. And this was an extremely moving moment. I mean, the only thing you could see is actually tears coming down his eyes, that he can actually still do, but there wasn't a dry eye in the entire amphitheater with about 2,000 people. And then right after that, we saw a wheelchair tennis player who's been paralyzed for 12 years walk for the first time on our stage using an AI-powered exoskeleton. And then just going on this theme of how AI can help people with accessibility, we hosted a press conference later that day where we had all types of applications where, using different devices where you put this kind of helmet on, and even if you're blind, we did a demo with someone who wasn't blind, an ambassador actually, and he was able to walk around and navigate the room blindfolded using this device. So when you see all of these things really starting to affect people's lives in a positive way, it really is encouraging. And of course, the use cases, go well beyond those of accessibility. For example, in the area of disaster management, using a combination of satellite data with drone data, IoT, social media data to basically help to predict, mitigate, and manage natural disasters, like flood forecasting, for example, or on the other hand, sending robots into environments where you wouldn't want to necessarily send a human into maybe a meltdown of reactor or a fire. So I could go all day about the positive practical use cases, but I think we are really starting to see them, go beyond the PowerPoint, let's say, to really affecting people's lives in a positive way.
And I want to point out that we have some of the recipients of some support from AWS, the fellows here that are in the back. And I was in a session earlier this morning with some of them talking about the humanitarian application for using AI, and so some of the things that they're doing. So there are multiple sessions here this week, I think, that are open, and that would be maybe interesting to do a bit of a dive deep on some of the things that Fred just shared with us in those applications. So we know that with any new technology and with any emerging technology, there are challenges and blockers. And so share with us, Fred, some of those challenges and blockers in implementing AI for good, and how companies like AWS and others here can support the UN in overcoming those challenges and blockers.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest bottlenecks preventing AI for good solutions scaling globally, I would have to say there's two parts to that. One relates to infrastructure. So we've done, I think, a fair job in connecting the world, but there's still 2.6 billion people who remain unconnected. And if you have AI that needs data, then you need mass digitization and you need connectivity to generate the data that would work to feed the AI. And I think it's more about not connectivity for the sake of connectivity, but basically you have large parts of the world where you actually do have connectivity, or you have at least a satellite coverage. I mean, I know Amazon with Kuiper has made a lot of progress in that way. So I don't think coverage and connectivity itself would be the big bottleneck. It will be more about how do you provide the incentives for people to move online when there is actually coverage? Because in many parts of the world, things like not being able to read or write, literacy is an issue. You have persons with disabilities. You have basically content that's not available in thousands of languages and dialects in Africa, for example. And I think AI can play a great role in removing that friction to help people move online to access services and content and entertainment and tools and things that would help them to actually participate. And what I mean by participate is really benefit from their collective problem solving, their creativity, their storytelling, their culture. Because I think how it is right now is the equivalent of a V8 engine that's only firing on 4 cylinders. So I think if we can solve that connectivity issue, then we could maybe have the engine working at least on almost all cylinders. And the second major bottleneck, I would say, is data sharing. So I can't tell you how many times I've been in a meeting and I'll ask people, how many people in the room have data? And all the hands go up. I'm sure if I asked a question here, many hands would go up. And then I say, okay, who's willing to share data? And then all of a sudden everyone's staring at their shoes and then the room goes quiet. So really figuring out how to share data in a way that's useful for AI, but still respects privacy. And there are techniques for that. I mean, you have homomorphic encryption, federated learning. There are different techniques which have yet to really achieve scale. But just a small anecdote, I was in reInvent 3 years ago, and I was in a technical presentation, and it was a marketing presentation. And then they were talking about clean rooms as a solution where you could have big marketing databases from different organizations, like let's say Coca-Cola, the NFL, and American Airways, or what have you, and then overlap these databases to share the data in a way that's useful, but still respect for privacy of those 3 companies. And then I thought to myself, gosh, that's what humanitarian agencies have been looking for all along. So I think a lot of times the solution to government problems or humanitarian problems can be found in commercial products, if you will. But we need to connect the dots, and that's where that's probably missing as well. Yeah.
Well, I love that you took some learnings from attending reInvent. That's the point this week, right? This is the learn and be curious, and the opportunity to attend the breakout sessions and take away key things that can help you with your missions. And really, AWS has several different ways that we can share data. We have the AWS Open Data Initiative, where we will host your data if you're willing to make it available for use globally, as well as the Amazon Sustainability Data Initiative for data that's relevant to sustainability initiatives. And you can learn more about that here during reInvent this week. Let's change gear a little bit and talk about governance, AI governance. You in your role have the opportunity to really meet with government officials and policymakers and regulators globally. So share a little bit about what you're hearing from them in terms of AI governance.
Yes, I'd say, first of all, governments are not traditionally known for moving very quickly. I think. And the only thing slower than a government might be a collection of governments. But again, going on the good news, I would say there are exceptions to the rule. And I would say when it comes to AI, I think it's been really encouraging to see how quickly governments have mobilized around the world to try and put a frame and come up with some kind of AI governance policy, principles, guidelines, regulations. And if you look at these past 2 years, you've had the EU AI Act, you have the Executive Biden order, you have the Hiroshima process in Japan, you have the AI Safety Summit in the UK and in China. So you're seeing all these like AI governance processes accelerating at full speed around the world, which is actually really encouraging because I think people are generally worried, they're aware, they want to leverage the opportunity while minimizing the risk. So I think that's what everyone has in common. And what we did this year at our summit is we created AI Governance Day, and the theme was to move from principles to implementation. So how do you move from all of these like ambitious words and texts, which I think are really good, and then really go into, okay, how can we start to implement these things? Because there's a huge gap between what we want to do and the knowledge, skills, and resources that exist in different organizations and institutions to be able to actually do that. And one of the tools or techniques identified during Governance Day that could support this in the most practical way is actually standards, because when it comes to AI governance, the devil is in the details, and standards have details. So by basically focusing on standards that could support different AI governance processes around the world, especially international standards that could be used for many different cases, I think we can really move forward quite quickly on this. And one thing we identified at this year's summit was, okay, there might be different approaches and philosophies, whether you're north, south, east, or west. But one thing that everyone had in common was, how do you handle, the epidemic of deepfakes and misinformation, for example, or how do you handle climate change and the energy demands that will come from AI, or, so there are many big things to work upon, and there are standards to support that. And ITU, being a standards-making body, I think can bring different stakeholders together to make sure that the solutions that we come up with are inclusive, they're sustainable, they respect privacy, they respect human rights, and at least you have this kind of foundation on which they're built that can serve the whole world instead of maybe just different specific parts of the world, let's say.
So I think in the audience we have representatives from all over the world, from different organizations, companies, government, nonprofits. And we've talked about governance, we've talked about accessibility, but I know one of the things that you're working on is democratizing the access to AI. And so talk a little bit about what you're doing there, and maybe a preview about this year's upcoming Global AI Summit.
Sure. Well, I think maybe the starting point to democratizing access to AI, especially in developing countries, is having that solid foundation of making sure that things are aligned with sustainable development goals, that they're inclusive, that you're mindful of the challenges that developing countries face when it comes to infrastructure and data and the economy and politics and what have you. And I think one thing I've learned in the past few years, because I do, like Jeff, get to travel a lot. We were just in India for 2 weeks doing our first AI for Good Impact India. We just did one in Johannesburg. We're going to do another one next year in Africa. And I think there's a shift in mindset is needed where, especially a few years ago, there was almost an attitude of, let's say, developed countries and big tech companies saying, "Oh, don't worry, we'll help you." Almost like giving a handout. We'll give you the AI, we'll give you the tech, you use it as it is, and everything will be fine. We know what we're doing. And when you go to India or South Africa, for example, you actually see that they're not looking for handouts. I mean, these people have amazing ideas. They have unique challenges that require unique problem solving and a unique cultural and contextual approach to solving those issues, and that they're not looking for handouts. They need help. Yes, they need cloud, they need maybe best practices and guidance, but to assume that you have like a kind of one-size-fits-all, that a solution in Silicon Valley or in Brussels or in Shenzhen is going to work well in Kigali, that's a little bit naive. So I think getting past that mindset of okay, we'll give you stuff and everything will be fine, and actually leveraging their creativity, their ingenuity, their problem solving. And we run actually a lot of machine learning challenges in developing countries. And when you see the solutions that they come up with, they're amazing. And they're highly educated. They just happen to be in situations where the economy's bad and they don't have access to resources. So I think being mindful of that is probably the best way to help, instead of just saying, here, use this out of the box.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And as I travel and I meet different stakeholders around the world, I really do see that there's this opportunity for improved collaboration. And when we look at the public-private partnership and the ways that we can collaborate, talk a little bit about how through collaboration we can actually improve innovation.
Yeah, AWS has been a partner of AI for Good pretty much since the beginning. And in the beginning, when I was saying you need a certain mindset of thinking global, but then also being aware of the local situation when it comes to things like culture and data and infrastructure. So really having this kind of global problem-solving mindset is really the starting point. And with AWS, we've done a number of interesting projects where we launched this year what we call the AI for Good Impact Initiative, where we want to basically scale AI problem solving globally and equally across all SDGs. So one thing we did was Werner Vogels came to last year's summit and also this year's summit, and really supporting our startup incubator system. It's called the Innovation Factory, and then donating rather large amount of cloud credits. And then through our different projects, we're able to identify high potential startups, high potential activities like machine learning challenges, and also high potential research projects from all around the world. And then through this collaboration, we're able to hand out cloud credits and also advice, support, and mentorship to help them scale, let's say. So I think that was an amazing practical example of how you can have that kind of partnership between the UN, between tech, but then also making sure it gets to the right people in developing countries.
Well, thank you for taking the time to come to reInvent and to share your words and thoughts with this group today. And I look forward to, and my team and AWS, the continued partnership with you and the AI for Good initiative, as well as the entire UN ecosystem. Thank you, Fred.
Yeah, thank you, Abby, and thank you all for your time. And you're all welcome in Geneva next year, 8th to the 11th, if you can make it. If you can't make it, it's online as well. And we also, on the Neural Network, have basically 150 online events and collaboration efforts and challenges all year long. So it's open, free of charge. Anyone can join. And we just basically need your ideas, your brain power, anything you can bring to the table. So thanks to all of you.
That's a good call to action. Thank you. Over to you, Jeff.
Yeah. Fred, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give another round of applause for that very inspiring conversation. And Fred, on behalf of AWS, thank you for the ongoing partnership. It's just an honor, and we're humbled to be a partner with the United Nations, especially all the good that you're doing. So
likewise, thank you.
On that. Our vision and our mission is clear. And that is that AI can be used for societal good. And that may be through government and citizen services, or through phenomenal relationships like we have with the United Nations, humanitarian efforts, nonprofits literally around the globe. So how do you get started? How do you take this inspiring conversation and this discussion that you just heard here and get moving? Well, I'd highlight two wonderful QR codes that are up there. One, this past June at the Worldwide Public Sector Summit that we held in DC, we announced a $50 million in AWS promotional credits. That's to help on the training across generative AI projects that are out there. And that is one way to go ahead and get started. The second is this wonderful QR code, and that it's an ebook where we've documented best practices that we've seen literally around the globe of how to get going. What are those practical steps? What are those discussions on data and getting that clean data into, or cleaning the data to get it on into the cloud, to be able to harness the insights that you're looking for to help drive that societal good. These are just two practical steps that we would encourage. We also recognize that many of you have lots of different questions or want to surface up your success on leveraging generative AI for common good. And this is where I put up my contact information. Please go ahead and stay in touch. We want to go ahead and make sure that no matter where you are, as we drive and bring the corporation to the country, we're bringing the right resources, the right talent, the right partnerships together with all of you. So please continue to stay in touch because we want to continue to strive to earn your trust every single day. With that, we hope that you have a wonderful time here at reInvent. Thank you again for making the effort to travel here and join us, and hope that you have just a great time, lots of different sessions the next couple of days. We look forward to that ongoing partnership. Thank you so much for your time.